How far will you reach out your hand? And what will you touch for your faith in Jesus? In today's gospel, Jesus touches the leper, not only to heal him, but to show us not to be afraid of those who show their illness on the outside. And that sometimes the simple touch of a hand and the feeling that comes with the love in that hand is far greater than just looking with pity upon them in their afflicted state. How many of you remember the old adage, it's not what's on the outside that counts, but what's on the inside that counts? I want you to think about that phrase for a moment and ask yourself, how many times have we only looked at what is on the outside of a person and not what's on the inside of a person? We are all afraid, but we need to overcome our own fears and make room for Christ in the things we say and do to those around us. But we are not alone. We simply need to look further into the Bible at the many saints that have had to conquer their own fears to live out the example of Jesus in today's gospel. Today I want to share with you one saint, St. Francis, my favorite saint. One day while he was praying enthusiastically to the Lord, Francis received this message. Francis, everything you loved and desired to have, you must despise and hate if you wish to know my will. Because once you begin doing this, what before seemed delightful and sweet will be unbearable and bitter. And what before made you shudder will offer you great sweetness and enormous delight. He was overjoyed at being confronted by the Lord. So one day he was riding his horse near Assisi when he met up with a leper. And even though he usually shuddered at lepers, he made himself dismount, gave him a coin, kissed his hand, and accepted a kiss back from the leper. Francis remounted and continued on his way. He then began to see himself less and less, until by the grace of God he became a complete victor over himself. A few days later, he moved to a hospice of lepers, taking with him a large sum of money. Calling them all together, he kissed the hand of each, giving them alms. Then he left there. What before had been bitter, that is to see and touch a leper, was turned into sweetness. For as he said, the sight of a leper was so bitter to him that he refused not to look at them or even to approach their dwelling. If he happened to come near their house or to see them, even though he was moved by pity to give them alms through an intermediary, he also turned his face away and held his nose. With the help of God's grace, he became such a servant and friend of the lepers that, as he testified in his testament, he stayed among them and served them with humility. So what did St. Francis do? Did he look beyond what was on the outside of the person to what was on the inside of the person? And we need to ask ourselves, can we do the same? Although we do not suffer from a physical leprosy on the outside, we may suffer a spiritual or sinful leprosy on the inside. Is there something in our lives that we are carrying around with us that keep us unclean and make us feel unworthy to be full and active members in our community? Is there something so hideous to look at or to touch that we cannot fathom letting Jesus touch it? After all, Jesus is the Messiah, the Holy One of God, our Savior. However, Jesus is also the Jesus in this parable, who is moved with pity, who wills to heal, and who outstretches his hand to touch what is thought to be untouchable. If Jesus is unafraid to touch our deepest, darkest hurts and impurities, then let us not hide them. Just as a leper approached Jesus with faith and humility, let us approach Jesus for our healing.